So now let's get into it. We've established ourselves within this painting. That's Giovanni Arnolfini. He's an Italian from Lucca, living in Bruges, and he is here as an international banker and cloth merchant. He is rolling in dough, and he's decided to hire Jan van Eyck to paint this portrait of him, Giovanni Arnolfini, and this woman, who we're not quite sure who she is. She could be his wife, Costanza, who passed away the year before, or a generic woman, wife. And then the swell of her belly. It can be interpreted as pregnancy or simply high fashion. Let's talk about it as high fashion, because what it is a display of Giovanni's wealth. Let's look at those details of her again. Okay, first, we see her wearing this very fine linen and ruffled lace headpiece. More specifically, what she has on her head is called an escoffion. That's the French for it. An escoffion, it's one of a series of popular late medieval, early Renaissance headpieces that women would wear, women of high rank and status would wear. And it's pieces of wool that have been bunched or felted, and they are placed on the head, and they are often threaded with fine materials, gold or silver threading and embellishments, and they are on the sides of your head, and then you drape a very fine silk or lace fabric over the top. So she's got this extremely fashionable headpiece, and then on top of that, look at this gorgeous frilly lace. All of this is hand work. So we need to see this as a display of not only craftsmanship, but money, because this is not made by machines. This is made by people's hands. This is manual labor. This is before the Industrial Revolution. And fabric, which you know Giovanni is a cloth merchant, fabric is a statement of wealth. Fabric requires so much labor, so many resources to go from the raw material to these fine finished products. So she's got this very elaborate ruffled escoffion. And then if we were to go through, we see that she has underneath that two dresses. So she has this underdress that is this gorgeous blue, and it's lined in this gold brocade at the wrists. And then over that dress, we have this deep green wool. Now, the fact that these are such bright and brilliant colors means that this is extremely expensive fabric, because it requires more dye and more time to treat that fabric to get these brilliant colors. So we have this beautiful gold and blue dress, and then over on top of that, you can see the deep sleeve where she can tuck in her arms. And then the sleeves of the green wool are lined, and not just the sleeves, but the interior. You can see that here. The underskirt, or the underside of the skirt, is also lined in white fur. Now, the fur here, another statement of wealth. Fur is extremely expensive because it's an animal that has to have been cared for and then farmed for its skin, its fur. And this beautiful white fur, very fine, very rare, or not rare, very expensive. And it's just all over this gown. It's soft, supple fur all over her. Oh, ooh. So it's extremely expensive just in the raw materials. And then let's think about the workmanship, the craftsmanship that goes into this. I like this detail here because you can see the embellishment on the sleeve. See these cuts and these stitches that create this texture on the thick green wool? That's all hand cut. That's all hand stitched. It's completely unnecessary. It is an embellishment, and it is expensive. And so what we see again is a statement of craftsmanship, of money, material wealth, the raw materials that go into this. And then further, just to kind of pull back and think about this gorgeous gown, all of this excess fabric, the skirt of it just pulls around her. It's so unnecessary, but it's there to be a statement of wealth, that this kind of waste on the skirt is okay. They can afford it. Not they. Who can afford it? Arnolfini can afford it. He pays for this. So he can afford to drape this figure in this excess amount of fabric. Let's think about this again a little bit later, but I just like to establish the fashion that she's wearing and how phenomenal and gorgeous it is. Okay, so we're going to look at the elements around this painting, and we're going to discuss what the probable meaning or message of the artwork is. The term I want to now introduce you to is iconography. Iconography is the study of symbolic, often religious, meaning of objects, persons, or events depicted in artworks. And that is really what we do together in this class, is we break apart the different elements, we understand their symbolic meaning or what they're in reference to, and then we apply that message to the overall artwork. And that's what we're going to do here. So we're going to use our iconography skills. The term iconography, icon is Greek for image, graphy is Greek for writing. So when we say iconography, we're literally writing with images. Lovely. So let's look at some of these elements around the space. So we have Giovanni, we have our woman, and they are in a room. And the room has all this stuff. Now all of this stuff is here on purpose because Jan van Eyck, he didn't have to paint that chandelier. He didn't have to paint those shoes or that dog. They must have a reason, and that is the iconography that we're going to look at. So let's look at a couple of these elements now. There are two pairs of shoes in the room. Tossed off in front of Arnolfini, we see this wooden pair. And then in the background, you can see in this detail here, we have these beautiful red silk slippers. What these are, or if we were alive in 1434, what we'd easily recognize these as are clogs. Clogs are outside shoes. They're the shoes you wear on the outside of your shoes when you go outside. What? Okay, before indoor plumbing, all of the waste that your house produces goes out onto the streets. So all of your dirty dishwater, all of your refuse, all of your human waste is on the streets. And all of the carts, donkeys and horses that truck on through the streets, all of their pee, all of their poo, all of their waste is also on the streets. The streets are often muddy, dusty, crusty, stinky, and you don't want to get that on your beautiful shoes. What if you have this beautiful fine leather slipper or this silk slipper? Oh, I don't want to get my new boots ruined. You wear your outdoor shoes, your clogs. And here we see Giovanni's clogs. You see how they elevate you off of the sludge when you walk outside. And then in the background, we see these female clogs, these feminine clogs. They are perhaps not as utilitarian friendly, but in this day and age, in 1434, the woman of the house isn't going to be doing a lot of walking around outside if she's not in a carriage. And so these slippers here would have been seen as her domesticity, how she's being kept for safe and clean in this home. It was also tradition in Northern Europe, specifically in Flanders. It was tradition for a man and a woman, when they got married, the man would gift his new bride with a pair of new clogs. Is that what we're seeing here? Is this a marriage? Have they just gotten married? Are those her new shoes? That's another idea. That's why this is often referred to as the marriage portrait or the wedding portrait. Are we witnessing a wedding here? Is that why their hands are joined in this way? We'll talk about their hand gestures in a little bit, but these clogs, domesticity, marriage, okay. Now behind, or I should say in front of her clogs, we see this gorgeous rug, and it's under this massive bed. The rug and the bed are behind the female. I'm not calling her Costanza because we're not quite sure who she is. But that rug, if we were alive in 1434, living in Bruges, we would know our luxury goods. And we would know that pattern is a pattern for a Persian rug. Persian, as in from Persia. What we have in this room is an exotic import all the way from Persia. Now, Persian rugs, even today, are celebrated for their fine craftsmanship and skill and beauty of pattern and composition. And the same applies in 1434. So would this have been an expensive rug, having been transported all the way from Persia, which is now modern-day Iran? Yeah, this is a very expensive rug. And it's here in this household of Giovanni Arnolfini. Okay, the bed. Now you might be thinking, don't just say a room, call it the bedroom. There's their bed, Miss Cortez. Okay, it is technically a room with a bed, a bedroom, but the way that rooms or the function or purpose of rooms would have been divided is different than how we understand and use them in Western culture today. The rooms could have multiple functions, and it was not unusual. In fact, it was very common to have the most expensive objects of the household placed in the front public rooms, because as people come in, you're like, hey, come on in, and then as you sit down and you're like, oh, what, oh yeah, this is my crazy expensive object, my artwork, or my bed. Beds were most often the expensive object in the house. Again, think about it. It is not just the craftsmanship of the frame, but also the materials to make the mattress and the fabric that drapes around a bed. Here, we can see that it's draped in excess amounts of this gorgeous red fabric, and then the drapery around the bed framing, it is knotted into these attractive baubles. The bed, oh gosh, we could talk so much more about it. But beds often had these curtains around them, not to create like cool little hideouts, but to literally keep in the warmth at night because it got super cold. So the cloth around here and the cloth on your sheets, it's money, money, money. And it's bright red, very expensive to have this bright red dye fabric. Basically, think of it this way. It's like Giovanni has a cherry red Lamborghini parked in his front living room. That's what that represents. That kind of money. And he's just like, oh, what? What's up? Yeah, that's where you sleep. Okay, so Giovanni, he's flossing. He's showing off his wealth. We see it in his wife. What about Giovanni? Here in this detail, again, oh my goodness gracious. Can we talk about Jan van Eyck and his amazing details? This is a skill that Jan van Eyck is known for, his attention to these minute details, his control of the brushwork. This is painted using oil on wood panel, so oil paint, and that's how he's able to control the modulations of color and this fine strokes of his brushes to give us these amazing textures. So what we have is a close-up of Giovanni's fur-lined silk velvet sleeveless cape. So he has his under tunic, and then on top of that he has this, did you hear me when I said it is a chocolate brown silk velvet fabric? Oh, luxury! And then it's lined in this soft brown fur on the collar and down the sleeves. Let's take a moment to appreciate the gorgeousness of this outfit and his wife's fur-lined dress, because together these are statements not only of wealth but of status. How so, Miss Cortez? Because in these strict cultures where you have rights based on your status, the way to identify your rights to exist in this world were displayed on your body. What do I mean? I mean that there were laws. They were called sumptuary laws. And they defined what was appropriate for nobility, merchant class, and peasant class for what they could wear. Because based on how I identify you from what you look like, that's how many rights you have. And fur, in terms of sumptuary laws, fur was restricted to those of the higher status. So the fact that Giovanni has these fur-lined cuffs, collars, her dress, these are statements to their higher status, that they are allowed, literally by law, they are allowed to wear fur. If a person of nobility is found dressing below their station, they could be penalized. If a person from below the peasant class were to dress above their station, they could be penalized. The reason is, how do I know how to treat you if I don't know what you are? So these fur-lined garments are not just statements of wealth, but of status within the culture. When we look at the detail here of this gorgeous sleeve, we're also going to be thinking about the function or the functionality of this dress. Giovanni, he's got this beautiful overcoat and it hits just about below the knee. He can move around, right? It's a cape. He can move his arms. What about her in this dress? You think it's going to be light and breezy? No, it's like crazy heavy. It's layers and layers of heavy fabric, and then it's dragging around her. Do you think she washes the dishes in this dress? No. Do you think she does the dusting around the house in this dress? No. Did she like go cook a meal in this dress? No. Who? Who does those things? Who washes the dishes? Who does the dusting? Who cooks the meals? Not her. Servants. So her inability to do anything of physical labor is a statement of Giovanni's wealth, because he can afford servants who do all of that for her, for him. I know, it's so much. It's so awesome, right? To think about how fashion is a play of statement or of status. Let's look at a few more elements. So behind Giovanni, we see some oranges. In fact, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 oranges. And then in between them, we see this adorable dog. Let's look at the oranges and talk about what's up. Why would Jan van Eyck put oranges in this painting? What's the point of that? Put those in the kitchen. Okay. 1434. Refrigerated trucking is not a thing. So oranges, which require lots of hot sun and moisture, they do not grow easily outside of southern Mediterranean coastline. To get them here in Bruges, that's going to take some time, some effort, some money, some resources. So do you think that oranges are expensive imported fruit? Yeah, they are. And how many does Giovanni have? 4 of them. So he doesn't just have one expensive import fruit, an orange. He's got 4 oranges. Oh, let's think about that in terms of money and status. Well, he's buying this expensive fruit He's got 4 of them. This is like having like 4 iPads just like lying around the house. Oh, what? There's my iPad. Yeah, sure, sure, sure. Additionally, in terms of iconography, fruit that have seeds on the inside, such as oranges, are often symbols of fertility. Because you take a seed, you plant it, it grows, plant another one, you can grow a whole forest or a whole generation. So, is this a statement of fertility? It's next to Giovanni, not the other woman. So is this a statement of Giovanni's fertility? We know that after 7 years of marriage, he and his first wife, Costanza, were not able to have a child. Is this him saying, I'm fertile, don't worry? Okay. Another iconographic element of oranges. His first wife, Costanza, was closely aligned with the Medici family in Florence, Italy. The crest of the Medici family features oranges. So is this then a statement of her connections to the Medicis? Is this her? Or is this fertility? Is it both? Is it wealth? We're going to gather up all of this and think about it together. This dog here, adorable. This dog stands in between them and is a symbol of fidelity, faithfulness. Think about it. Man's best friend is his dog. Dogs are often associated with being a companion or faithful companion. And here, the dog placed between these 2 figures, is this talking about the fidelity of the 2 of them, Giovanni and the woman? Side note, it's also why in cartoons, old cartoons, you often see the dog's name is Fido. Fidelity and Fido, faithfulness. I know. This dog isn't just any dog. This is an Affenpinscher. An Affenpinscher was all the rage. It's a very specific breed of dog that was all the rage during 1434. It's like the Labradoodle or the Golden Doodle of 1434. So we have this Shishi dog, and it's here between this couple. It's also a small dog. Now, I'm asking you to think about a lot of things with this dog, okay? But have you met a big dog and a small dog? Who's usually more chill? The big dog. Who's usually really yappy and barky and feisty? The little dog. Little dogs are associated with passion and fire. Little dog. So is this Giovanni making a connection of fidelity, but also passion and love? Fertility. Their gesture here, let me zoom in on it. Open palms, often a symbol of vulnerability. He takes her hand in his, a sign of ownership and companionship. His hand over here is one similar to a gesture of blessing. So is he blessing her? Is he blessing this union? Again, back to the idea of this being a marriage. Now, some would think, oh, it can't be a marriage. They're not in church. The idea of a church wedding is not popular until the 19th century. So not until the 1800s do we see church weddings being a thing. Behind the woman, we see an elaborately carved chair. And on this chair are 2 elements I want to arrest our attention. There is a female figure and a small broom. The female figure is identified as Saint Margaret. Saint Margaret is the patron saint over pregnancy, pregnant women. Is that a statement of Costanza? Or, as many art historians have thought, is this simply a generic woman who is now fertile or is now pregnant because of Giovanni's fertility? The broom hanging beneath the St. Margaret statue. Cleaning up, tidying up, domesticity. A woman has her role as the caretaker of the house. And those are associated with this female here. Above them, we see this elaborate chandelier. Oh, yeah, and the elaborate carvings here, expensive. Elaborate chandelier, metalwork, yeah, crazy expensive. But what good is this chandelier when it only has one candle? What? Why? Iconography. In terms of iconography, the imagery of a single lit candle is used as a symbol of God, that God is present, that God is here in this room. And then with that concept of the single burning candle as a representation of God's presence in this space, is this a blessing of a union between Giovanni and a future wife? A filler, a blank that then can be filled in by anybody at a later point in time? Perhaps. Behind them on the wall is this amazing framed mirror. Now it's a convex mirror. It's convex, it's bulging out. And that's why we see this kind of warped perspective. And then next to the frame is a set of prayer beads that have been set on a nail in the wall. And then above that, let's zoom in, give it its full justice. Above that, Jan van Eyck has written his name. Now it reads in Latin, Johannes van Eyck Fuit Hic, 1434. And that translates to Jan van Eyck was here in 1434. So we see the hand of the artist scrawled almost like graffiti on the back wall. This is not unusual. It's very typical for artists to want to put their scrawls on, tiny corners or little obscure elements. But it's so prominent in the back of this painting. And then the language he uses, Latin, Johannes van Eyck Fuit Hic. What is the significance of the Latin language? The language of scholars, the language of the highly educated. Okay. And then the wording, the word choice, he says Johannes van Eyck Fuit Hic was here. Now, as I said, typical for artists to put their name somewhere, but they usually say made this. It would be more typical for him to say Jan van Eyck made this, but he didn't say that. He said was here. In this room? Whoa, let's look at the mirror. What do you see in the mirror? You see the oranges, you see the window, you see Giovanni, you see the woman, and there are two other people in this room. Is one of them Jan van Eyck? Is he claiming himself to be a witness? A witness to what? And this again brings art historians back to the idea that this perhaps is a marriage, some kind of a ceremony. There's a lot happening. Now, I know this is a long lecture video, and I greatly apologize, but let's now kind of clean it up. Let's think about what this could possibly mean. What is this artwork in our next video?